All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Work Hard, Live Soft. We are in the middle of the My Messy Middle series. In last episode, I talked about grace and accountability, and I want to just talk about how there's such an ROI on grace. I just got off a sales call a few minutes ago, and I was like, how did you guys hear about me? And it was from a podcast that I did a few months ago. And so a few months ago, I was scheduled to be on a podcast. And when I joined, the host, you could tell she was just not prepared. She was traveling. She wasn't in her usual space. She wasn't in her office. The Wi-Fi wasn't really working that well. And finally, after about 5 minutes of her trying to get it together, I was like, do you think you want us to just reschedule until you get back home and you're in your space and you have everything together? And I really honestly wasn't mad. I could just tell it just wasn't going to be a productive episode, because when you're not, in your element, you're going to be a little bit flustered. And she was like, I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And there's a part of me that thought I could have been annoyed, right? Like, why did you get on my calendar? Why did we schedule this? Why didn't you just cancel it? You knew you were going to be out of town. You should have known that this and that. And it's like, we're human. Sometimes we mess up, right? We don't do things perfectly. And that is why it's important to extend grace. And I know in the last episode, I was saying, extending grace when people try their best. But that is the thing about grace. It's like, we're extending grace even when it wasn't somebody's best foot forward. So I hope that encourages you to extend grace to somebody today. It's really important to do so. And, in the last episode, when I talked about the difference between grace and accountability, I think it's important for accountability to primarily be reserved for people you have relationships with, right? Like, imagine me getting on that podcast and being like, I just really think you should have been prepared. And honestly, you should have done this and you should have blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you don't know this lady to be telling her what she should have done or whatever. Now I can have my opinions on it, but what served both of us well in that moment was just extending grace. So, all that to say, had I been annoyed, had I canceled, had I said, you know what, this is just not good for me, she's unprofessional, and I'm never gonna, do a podcast ever with her, she doesn't get access to me or my time anymore, I never would have been on the podcast. It ended up being a really good interview, and I'm really glad that I connected with her. And so this couple heard me on the podcast, and they're like, we've listened to her show for a while now, and we've just never heard an interview like that. It was so good, and we just knew we needed to get on the phone with you. And I had a phenomenal conversation with them. And so it's a couple I'm going to be working with inside of my reinvention mastermind program. And I'm excited and I'm just grateful. So glory to God for grace and for him instilling me with the desire to want to extend grace to people. So that is my win for the day. I thought I would share that since it just happened maybe about an hour ago and I talked about grace yesterday. A couple things that I want to talk about today. I'm realizing I get my best thoughts in the shower, and so I wrote some notes on some things that I've been thinking about. So the past couple of days, I'm finally back home, which I just get so excited about. I am going to be traveling again next week, but I like to maximize on when I'm home and when I'm rested and really just doing my best to create my routine. Before I get into what I want to talk about, I saw somebody on Thread saying something about we're all talking about locking in, but should we have a conversation about why we keep falling off or why we get locked out in the first place? And honestly, I think it is a valid question. And I had a thought about, consistency and discipline. And the last couple of days I've been going to the gym at 5 a.m. And honestly, when I got in the gym, it felt like home. It felt like I was supposed to be there, right? It didn't feel foreign. And so I know that I've mentioned a few times that this year has felt different for me. And I think what's important to note, and a part of extending grace and accountability and understanding, is like, when circumstances change, so do your routines sometimes. And one principle or value that I've really been leaning into is When the facts change, so do we. When the facts change, so do we. And this is very important. I was watching my friend and his daughter maybe about a week ago, and there was something that he said he was going to do with her. I can't exactly remember what it was. And she was like, but you promised me. And he was like, I did promise you. And he's like, but the circumstances changed. He's like, I didn't break my promise. The circumstances changed. And that could be something you look at and it maybe sounds a little bit manipulative, but it was true. It was like I made this promise and this commitment under these circumstances. And if I can still meet, that promise, I could still meet that standard, I would love to, but based on the circumstances changing, I can no longer meet, the commitment that I made. And I think that, I say all that to say, when we're looking at why we fell off, we have to look at what has changed in my life. And when I look at, the last 18 months of my life, moving out of my high rise, so just going downstairs to a gym apartment is just not a thing anymore. And then I traveled to different countries. I went to, where did I go? I went to Colombia for 3 weeks. And honestly, I did work out. I was in shape on that trip because I was with one of my close girlfriends who we just think similarly. We were doing Bible study together. We were walking to the gym. We were Ubering to the gym. We walked by the beach, but we were in a situation where it made it easy to access the gym. After that, I went to Panama for a few weeks and I did not work out once. And the person I was with, we didn't work out at all. And so I think environments, who you're spending time with definitely makes a difference. And then when I came back home, I moved back into my house and I have not worked out in a big box gym for years. I've either always had a trainer or I was working out at an apartment gym. And so recognizing that it's not that you're not a disciplined person, it's that you need to recreate systems and recreate your discipline to match the new environment and your new circumstances. So when the facts change, so do you. When the facts change, the systems need to adjust to it. And so if you've been beating yourself up for falling off, I want you to take a look at, did something change and do you need to readjust your systems? Especially if you're like, but I've always been a disciplined person. Now, if you aren't the type of person that naturally works out and you go to the gym for maybe 2 weeks and then you stop going for 4 weeks, you didn't fall off. You just never really honestly had the system in place, right? You had never really built that discipline muscle in that specific area. So that is a different case where you're still figuring out your systems. You're still figuring out building discipline in that area. But if you are somebody who you're like, man, I've done such a good job at this for years and now things have changed. Did you get married? Did you move? Did you get a new job? Did you have a baby? There's so many different factors that we just need to reconsider. And I see this a lot with women who have babies where they're like, I'm going to snap back. And I see it with two different types of people. I see it with people who didn't really work out that much before getting pregnant and having a baby. And I'm like, well, what are you snapping back to? Because you weren't disciplined in the first place. And then there are some people who they worked out, they would wake up at 5 a.m., they would go to the gym, they would do 2-a-days, they would do all these things. And it's like, now your body might have that muscle memory, but you have a whole new human in this world and you need to readjust your systems and your discipline to align with your updated lifestyle. So that was something, that I've been thinking about as well. When I went in the gym, I'm like, this just feels so natural, but I was also feeling a little bit anxious or hesitant because I'm like, dang, when I go out of town next week, I'm going to be off of this routine and I need to figure out my routine when I'm out of town. So I think the learning lesson for me is, girl, if you're going to be doing this traveling, you need to figure out what your system or your discipline looks like when you're not at home. If you're most consistent at home, but you're not building a world where you're going to be at home consistently, you're going to have to figure out a game plan. Now, another thing that I was thinking about, I'm like, had my couple of days of going to the gym and recording my podcast and just being consistent and doing my work. And I'm like, how come I can't be like this all of the time? And so I really feel like this messy middle series is really just me asking myself good questions, asking myself questions that I need to answer. And so the question that I was thinking about was, what am I so busy doing that's keeping me from doing what I need to do? What am I so busy doing that's keeping me from doing what I need to do? Like, girl, what are you so busy doing that's keeping you from going to the gym? What are you so busy doing that's keeping you from getting in these steps? What are you so busy doing that's keeping you from recording this podcast? What are you so busy doing that's keeping you from doing these sales calls? What are you so busy doing that's keeping you from spending time with your family? Whatever it is. And I like to, one, pay close attention to what I find that my non-negotiables are naturally, like seeing my family. Anytime I know I'm going to be out of town, I am very intentional about going to see my family and having dinner with them because I miss them when I'm gone and they miss me when I'm gone. So even yesterday, coming back from Bali, coming back from Miami, I went over to my parents' house. And so my sister and her family went there and we all had dinner together. And now I've relieved myself of, one, the guilt of leaving them. I have auntie guilt and daughter guilt and sister guilt. And I filled my cup in that way, even though I was really, really sleepy by the time I got home. And I know that no matter what work I have to do, no matter what I have going on, I put my family first. I am going to go see my family. And so it's like you make that a non-negotiable. What are the other things in your life that you need to make a non-negotiable? Whether it is the exercise or it is the editing a podcast, editing a YouTube video, whatever it is. And so I will never be too busy for my family, but I find that I'm too busy to do other things in my business. And I came up with this question because as I was working through my things to do list and as I was looking through some of my marketing funnels and just looking at our sales and looking at our revenue, I'm like, one, I need to be intentional about auditing, right? This is something that I do for my clients and that I encourage them to do. This is something that I do for myself. It's a little bit easier to audit things in business. And so, for example, I audit things like, okay, what are our existing funnels? How are we currently building our email list? How are we currently getting people to book calls with us? How are we currently getting people to join the membership? How are we currently getting people to join our programs? How are we doing all of these things and what do we have in place? What projects do we have in place? What campaigns do we have in place? And then looking at it and saying, are all of these actually producing an ROI, or are we spending time and money on things that aren't producing the results that we want? And then I'm like, okay, well, what about in your personal life? Let's take an audit at all of the things we're doing here. Scrolling on social media, physically going to the grocery store instead of doing Instacart. And these are just some examples. But you have to ask yourself, what am I so busy doing that I don't have the time to do things that I actually need to do? And so I had a call with my content manager today. She does a lot of the marketing on our team. And I'm like, I know I have you doing a lot of like random things and random projects at one time. What's the most potent thing that we need to be doing? What are the things that are actually going to produce an ROI? And for me, if you guys are familiar with, listening to this podcast and attending any of my most profitable year ever classes, I talk about ROI not just being a return on financial investment, but am I producing impact? Does this actually impact anybody, or are we just wasting time creating this landing page and trying to optimize it and nobody's even seeing it? Or does this produce joy in my life? I like to do things that make money. I like to do things that serve people. I like to do things that serve people that pay me. And I like to do things that bring me joy, which is going to be traveling and spending time with my family. And so you need to figure out what your it things are. You need to figure out the things that you value and then say, am I spending time on things that produce an ROI? Am I spending time on things that produce an ROI? So what is really important to you? What do you want to see a surplus of in your life? I always want to see a surplus of being healthy and being in shape. I always want a surplus of spending time with my family. I always want a surplus of being at the beach. So what do I need to do to ensure that I get those things? So that is a really important question that I would really recommend asking yourself. Another thing that I've been thinking about lately, and I remember having this thought a few years ago, and I think that's the beauty of journaling, so you can write something down and remember it. But I've been thinking about how things just don't last forever. They don't. It's a nice idea to think that things last forever, but most things don't last forever. And I think sometimes we can get in a trap that holds us back from success by not launching things, not launching businesses or enjoying a relationship or whatever it is, because we're like, but it might not last forever. What if the Work Hard, Live Soft podcast didn't last until the day I died? What if the Work Hard, Live Soft podcast only lasts until 2027? Is that a reason to not do it? Is that a real reason to not do it? What if I would have known that I wasn't going to do Impact Weekend in 2026 when I first started doing it in 2018? Does that mean that these last 7 years I shouldn't have done Impact Weekend? What if I had made the decision to completely shut down Build to Impact? Does that mean I should have never launched Build to Impact 7, 8 years ago? And so I used to have this mindset of like, I want Built to Impact to be this $100 million company, and it's going to be my legacy, and my kids will be able to run it if they decide to. I started thinking about larger coaching companies like John Maxwell. I started thinking about Dave Ramsey. I started thinking about people who had prominent education brands that I'm like, their brands are going to last forever. They're going to last beyond their years. And so I was like, well, I want the Maya Elious brand, or I want the Built to Impact brand to be that big. And that was fine, that was my vision at that time. But regardless if it lasts forever or not, what matters in this season, right? That's what this whole series is about. What is true for me in this season? And what is true for me in this season is that I want to help people with reinvention. What is true for me in this season is that I want to talk about the messy middle. What is true for me in this season is that I want to explore a way to share systems in community. I don't know that the Work Hard, Live Soft community is going to last forever. I don't even know if it's going to last 18 months, but I do know that it's worth testing right now in this season. And so I think if we honor what is true for us right now, that it can be a good thing. And it's really just finding that healthy balance of like, what matters right now? And am I doing something important that can help me in the future? But I do think that what matters now is still helping future me. So not everything lasts forever. If you have an idea, girl, do it now. Do it now. Not everything lasts forever, right? When I first started blogging was so simple to me. It was easy for me. It was enjoyable for me. Now, if I blog today, the ROI on blogging looks completely different, right? When I started out on Instagram, there was no algorithm, but does that mean that I shouldn't have started on Instagram when I did? I think what I'm saying at the end of the day is that the best time to do something was probably a year ago. The second best time to do it is right now, because you never know what's going to change that could cause you to get to a place where you're like, this just doesn't make sense for me anymore. But I am grateful that I did it a year ago, or I am grateful that I did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So whatever ideas you have, figure them out, make decisions immediately, and start right now. I think what's also important about starting right now and recognizing that things don't last forever is that technology just moves at such a fast speed, right? And so when we think about our parents, like, it made sense for them to get an education, get a job, and work there for 40 years and retire. That's just not our reality anymore. And so when I even talk about, like, figure out what business you want to do for the next 4 to 5 years. Figure out what offer makes sense for you to sell for the next 6 months so you could get a cash influx. And then after that, you're like, I'm not doing this again. Even when I think about the girls in corporate, they are changing jobs every 2 to 3 years because it makes more sense in terms of them climbing up the ladder to go to a new company and make more money than it does staying at the same company. That's the game that I've been seeing from women or just people in corporate in general. And so because things are moving so quickly and opportunity looks different than it did 30 years ago, right now we need to be willing to adjust and pivot and reinvent every 3 to 5 years. That's really just where I'm seeing things going. So again, don't be afraid to make a decision for something that's going to make sense for you for the next 6 months, for the next 12 months, for the next 3 years, knowing that it's not going to last forever. What is going to last forever and what's true for you for the rest of your life is that you're going to need to pivot, you're going to need to reinvent. And lastly, just to pull together, all of my thoughts around not doing things forever, and just staying busy with things that don't produce any ROI. I was in the middle of reading The Science of Getting Rich. I'm rereading that. In the book, one of the things that the author says is failure is doing too many things in an inefficient manner and not doing enough things in an efficient manner. And I want you to take that with you as we close out today, because again, I want you to consider, do you feel like you're winning right now? Do you feel like you're getting an ROI right now? Or do you feel like, dang, I feel like I'm not really doing enough, or I feel like I'm not doing the right things? And one of the things that he emphasized is that getting rich and winning and getting the results that you want isn't about how much you're doing. It's about doing enough of the right things. And it's very easy to feel like we're being productive when we're trying a bunch of things, when we're getting distracted by shiny object syndrome. Again, me and my content manager just had this conversation that in the middle of doing a project, sometimes I'll come with different ideas, and this could just be me grasping at the straws, right? Make sure you're not operating in so much desperation that you're trying to do everything. Find the thing that works and that works well and put your energy towards that. And that was something that I had to share with even the couple that I just got off a call with. She had recently launched a food blog, and when she was sharing her stuff on social media, it was getting traction. So she's been to conferences and retreats about what to do as a blogger, and you should be putting ads into 4 different platforms, and then you should make sure that you're getting views, and you should make sure that you're doing this. And I'm like, I love that you are intentionally investing in yourself. And I love that you are the type of person who is willing to do the work. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do, whether you decide to work with me or you decide to work with anybody else, is to rein in on the amount of advice that you're receiving, because all of these things can work. It's just that a lot of these things won't be able to work at the same time because your effort and your energy is going to be stretched too thin. So I would advise that you figure out what are the 1 to 3 marketing strategies that I really want to go in on. What are the 1 to 3 ways that I want to bring in money? And just get very clear on that so you know exactly where to be spending your time and energy. But again, failure is doing too many things in an inefficient manner. And some of us are trying to do too many things so we can feel productive, so we can feel like, we're doing things that will bring in money or that will, generate the results that we want. But if we actually take a look at the ROI of all of the things that we're doing, probably only 20% of those things are producing the results that we want. So do an audit of your life and answer the question, what am I so busy doing that's keeping me from doing the things I actually need to be doing? I hope that today's episode was helpful. And when you answer that question, let me know what it is in the chat. What are some things that you need to cut out? What are some boundaries that you need to put in place? And what do you actually need to be focusing on in these last 2 months of the year? I'm excited to see your responses. And until next time, work hard and work smart. Work hard at the right things so you can live soft. Take care.